know, you had a big announcement soon on X. I feel like a lot of Cardano people were a little maybe upset or confused, etc.
Angry Crypto Show has been mostly made with Cardano content, so it doesn't really make sense. It's not really practical to just turn one's back on the Cardano community.
So how do you think your audience so far has taken to, the synergistic approach to making ADA and also now the XRP content?
I was in an XRP space actually on Sunday, just this Sunday, and Charles Hoskinson joined as well. And he gave his thoughts on XRP, and it was great to see the camaraderie. There's always going to be outliers that troll, and there's really not much you can do about that. You can't convince everyone. You can't make everyone happy. And so
Crypto with Paul here, and I want to know, are you team ADA or are you team XRP? Now remember, this video is not financial advice. However, it is a game changer if you hold XRP or ADA. Now let's get into my interview with Angry Crypto.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Coin Zone, another episode. I'm your host, Crypto with Paul. We are joined for a second time, one of our fan favorite. We got Angry Crypto back on the Coin Zone, guys. Angry Crypto, how are you, brother?
It's good to be back, man, and good to see you. It feels like yesterday, but it's been a few months, so happy to dive into some XRP goodness and talk about markets. So thanks for having me, and pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. So let's start right here. You had a big announcement soon on X. I feel like a lot of Cardano people were a little maybe upset or confused, etc. So just wanted to give you maybe the floor to address some things, but also, the XRP content has been great so far. So I appreciate that. But yeah, what made the jump to kind of also, ADA, but now XRP as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. First, I'll start off with myself. I won't make it too long, but I think I hit just some burnout. I think sometimes as creators, and this is a good reminder for all of us, that it's good to find a good cadence, a good balance in terms of how frequent we upload and whatnot. And sometimes we may not gauge burnout until months or years go by. So middle of August, I think I just really hit burnout that I underestimated. I was like, oh, let me take a week, head over to Miami, go on vacation. But when I came back, I'm just like, oh, I can't find it in me to start posting. So having some hiatus, taking some time off, fixing up the home and addressing some other things that needed some attention was also good. I think it's good, in the words of Nikola Tesla, to kind of be alone for some time, look inward, kind of some self-development. And I was like, oh, should I not make ADA? Should I deviate? But Angry Crypto Show has been mostly made with Cardano content, so it doesn't really make sense. It's not really practical to just turn one's back on the Cardano community and just go completely in one other direction. So the time off allowed me to reflect, even spiritually, just reflect on kind of purpose and what I'm doing and strengths. And then came back. First, I was like, let me pivot to XRP. And a lot of people were upset. They're like, what do you mean? Why are you pivoting to XRP? And I was like, oh, free will, and I was got a little bit harsh, albeit, we all have free will. We can decide what we want to do in life. But then I thought, you know what? For everybody, an abundant mindset is better. And I'm like, well, let's do both. It's like that good old meme. Why not both? So why not do ADA, talk about XRP? And they're both very old OG projects. So there's a lot of holders. I myself hold both. So I think a lot of people will enjoy coverage of both, including Charles. And I can dive into that later about his thoughts on XRP as a tech, and the team behind Ripple as well. So yeah, it's good to be back. Going to be uploading Monday to Friday, taking the weekends off, so to speak, to avoid such burnout. It's good to take a break. And it's going to be predominantly ADA, Cardano news, but also throwing in a lot of XRP stuff as well. So love both projects and happy to share some alpha.
So how do you think your audience so far has taken to, the synergistic approach to making ADA and also now the XRP content as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because some of them are just like, you're not part of the Cardano family, like, go away, XRP bad XRP. And it's like, well, it's interesting because both projects are deemed as like dinosaur coins. Both of them receive a lot of hate. And I would say that most of the community is actually very receptive. I was in an XRP space actually on Sunday, just this Sunday, and Charles Hoskinson joined as well. And he gave his thoughts on XRP, and it was great to see the camaraderie, the kinship between the communities. And that's always been big for me. I think most of the response has been positive. And I've been seeing people from the XRP community follow. Um, Most of the ADA community also has been positive. There are outliers, but there's always going to be outliers that troll. And there's really not much you can do about that. You can't convince everyone. You can't make everyone happy. And so most of it has been positive, and most people share both. There's a lot of common interest between the projects, including right at the top with Charles. So it's been very positive, and I'm glad that Charles has been making his opinions known on XRP, and how much he looks up to Brad Garlinghouse, David Schwartz, and calling XRP on Sunday decentralized, which is very like the common status quo is XRP bad, centralized, oh, Ripple bad man, boogeyman. But when we'll dive into that later, he likes the tech. And so I think a lot of people will look at Charles as a voice of authority, and a voice of reason, that if he's saying that, then probably there's some merit to it. So I think that's part of my goal too, is to move the pendulum, move the needle towards kind of seeing both sides and the strengths of both.
Now, I believe you had a post where you discussed how Charles made a reference to how Brad Garlinghouse has been instrumental so far in getting the market clarity bill passed, the Clarity Act. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, actually, I've prepared everything so that we can have everything good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and just read this off. I won't share the screen, but let's go here. So Charles actually on Sunday said a variety of stuff. Charles said that the hardest working person on the Clarity Act was Brad Garlinghouse. So these are all verbatim quotes from him. He said that Brad is in DC pretty much every day, one of the hardest working guys. I think the Clarity Act will pass in first quarter of 2026. Then he went on to say that Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta will enter crypto. So contrary to people trolling on X, these guys are shaking hands. These guys are, playing a role with the legislative branch and the and whatnot. So clearly, and there's a lot more that he shared also with David Schwartz. So it's good to hear that. It's good to hear from his positive sentiment. I guess I'll just dive into David Schwartz, the statement that he made, which again, how XRP. So Charles Hoskinson on Sunday said, XRP is decentralized. I didn't have to get permission from Brad Garlinghouse or David Schwartz to do the Glacier drop to the XRP community. So that is the midnight network drop that was conducted earlier, which is an indication of a real cryptocurrency. So he doesn't have to call 1-800-RIPPLE to airdrop to the XRP community, contrary to what people think. People often associate an entity with the tech. And so it was great to hear that from him.
You've also actually hyped Charles, calling David, quote unquote, very smart. And like you said, very easy to work with throughout this whole process with Midnight. Now, we had another guest on the Coin Zone who made a prediction that David Schwartz is actually Satoshi Nakamoto. Just curious to your thoughts, maybe not even on that, but just about David Schwartz in general.
Yeah, David Schwartz he talks a lot. He's very active on social media, but he's, again, one of those guys that can do both. He's very active with the community, but also extremely intelligent and a lot of things that just go right above my head. And I actually thought about that too. I remember making thumbnails on YouTube of like, is Schwartz Satoshi? And I remember diving deep into John McAfee, I think, made a statement that basically thinking that Satoshi was David Schwartz. He said that if there's someone that it would be David Schwartz. And lest we forget that even this is a perfect opportunity to read this post by Charles, that he said on Sunday again that XRP is one of the oldest cryptocurrency ecosystems in the entire industry, predating Ethereum. And so XRP tried something else, and XRP was kind of like the contrarian to Bitcoin. And so it's possible. I mean, no one really knows. And we see all the memes that have come to fruition lately about who Satoshi is. And that's always going to be around, but it is possible. And, only time will tell or not. The statement that Charles said regarding David Schwartz was mostly with Midnight. He said, and I quote, "I sat in many calls with David Schwartz. He's very smart, really helped us out, didn't charge us anything, really cares about the community, and wanted the community to be safe and have a good experience." And that was regarding Midnight. So they had back and forths, Ripple and the Midnight team, to really just hone in on Midnight Network and empowering XRPL, not only as one of the chains for their drop, but also moving forward with the proposed multi-resource consensus for Midnight Network, allowing XRPL and other networks to participate in kind of providing security concurrently on a consensus layer. So it's evident that David Schwartz, Brad Garlinghouse, these guys, Charles, they're in talks with each other. So it's very funny to see that, the trolls will think like, oh, they're enemies. It's not the case. These guys are shaking hands. These guys are having chats. And we probably only know the tip of the iceberg.
And why do you think these guys get so much hate? We have insiders like Chris Larson who, sells XRP, and then people call it centralized and they're dumping their tokens, etc. So do you think it's because of things like that, or do you think it's for something, other reasons?
I think it's simple. It's better for us as humans to simplify, right? We often overthink. We have analysis paralysis. I know as creators and anyone, we just think so much, and perfect is the enemy of done. And people doubted Ripple, but I think that it's just the lowest hanging fruit for people to just hate, whether it's Charles, whether it's people slam dunking on the Cardano incident, and really just kind of stretching it out in ways that it isn't. I witnessed personally during the bear market 2022, there was a big consensus of people saying, oh, Ripple's dumping on us. That's why we're stuck at 50 cents. And they're saying the same thing, even when XRP ran up to like $3 and beyond. So these talking pieces they're just cheap and easy to do. And I like to look at the numbers. And today I put a post out where Ripple has now surpassed $1.23 billion in reserves for RLUSD. It has smashed through the top 100. It's now at around number 83. And today there was $15 million of RLUSD minted, which again, people will be like, oh, but most of it is on ETH. Well, this $15 million was just minted on XRP, I believe. And so it's really context. And I think people should try to look at the silver lining that XRP is in ADA is in BTC. There's a different time and place for different projects, and they can complement one another. And so that's what I'm really trying to push, is the age of collaboration.
What can you say to the FUD about XRP? A lot of people think, Swift isn't going to use it. That was the whole point. Now XRP is not going to be used for anything, which is clearly not the case at all. I mean, they're already doing so many things, and they have been for years globally. So what can you say about that kind of FUD about XRP?
Yeah, I would say that I would just look at the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. When we see that in less than 11 months, Ripple has already accumulated over 1.23 billion, I would say that numbers don't lie. $1.23 billion, that's huge. And we know that stablecoin issuance is extremely important for the United States to dollarize the rest of the world. This will play a big role in terms of what Charles said on Sunday. He said, and I quote, stablecoins will be a soft dollarization of the developing world. The United States will fight the digital yuan using dollar-backed stablecoins. And that can't work unless you have rails that have selective disclosure and rational privacy. So the point I'm getting at is that Ripple has been doing tons of acquisitions. They've been minting their stablecoin, which is institutional, like enterprise grade. monthly attestations, US based, on XRPL and Ethereum, NYDFS compliance, and many more. And it's also going to help to also democratize and decentralize the big two dogs, the USDC and USDT, which is good for us to have options. We don't want a monopolizing effect of the stable coins if something were to happen. But furthermore, they've just continued to showcase that, stable coins are important, as we saw with the Genius Act. And we're going to likely see stacked incentives, because stablecoins, in the words of Charles Hoskinson, are really the biggest utility of real world assets, tokenized bills. And via these stablecoins, it's going to allow banks and participants to start stacking yield options, stacking incentives, getting the dollar into geo-restricted areas of the world that otherwise would be hard. And this is important. And it's also going to increase the US dollar dominance, as we said. So the US likes this. Ripple is showing that they're minting and getting to work with all their acquisitions. And we can dive deeper into the ETF stuff later. I would say that Ripple has proven to showcase that it's putting their money where their mouth is. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. And I'll just finish with this quote by, I believe, Franklin Templeton. There was an awesome post. Franklin Templeton saying that XRP plays a, quote, foundational role in global settlement infrastructure. And last but not least, lest we forget, XRP doesn't really have a middleman. Notice there's no native staking yet. There are yield products, but not having that kind of middleman or staking built in or tax built in, which Schwartz commented on as well, incentivizes more movement of the money of the underlying asset, XRP, which we know that money without movement doesn't really have much value. You want money to move hands, move from place to place. So whether we talk about, Ripple payments, the stablecoin issuance, all the acquisitions, I think they've proven that they are playing a critical role in taking like TradFi to the next level, taking, banking and whatnot to the next level, and bridging the gap between, the interests of the United States and the rest of the world to really just open the floodgates. So I look at RLUSD, I see stablecoin issuance, I see acquisitions, and it's like, okay, well, they're doing some good stuff.
Yeah. So you had mentioned the acquisitions a couple times now. There's the $1.25 billion acquisition of prime broker Hidden Road. That was this year. And then $1 billion purchase of treasury management software provider G Treasury. And then they also had a couple other ones in 2024, 2023. So they've been ripping. Ripple, not to make a pun there, but how big are these acquisitions? You don't see a lot of other it's not a blockchain, it's, Ripple doing this, but you don't really see a lot of other companies out there making big acquisitions like this.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like Ripple is just one of those ones where I can just fire up their Twitter and be like, very nice. It's like another great post, another great acquisition. You're right. I don't actually think nothing comes to my mind of companies in blockchain that are going at this rate. However, I will say that even at the very beginning, Ripple wanted to go about this in the right way. Prior to the litigation with Gary Gensler, 2020 and whatnot, one of the Ripple employees that I worked for in a project back in the bear market, his name Bob Way. And Bob Way had told me that Ripple always wanted to go about this in the right, compliant way from the beginning. It's not like they just deviated. It's not like they just were like, oh, we want to just chase like T-bills and do stuff now because it's a hot narrative. It wasn't like, okay, guys, zero knowledge proofs are popular now. Let's pursue this. But Ripple really had that at the forefront of their mission since the beginning. And so I don't really know of another company that, like Ripple has been pursuing this kind of the internet of money, if you will, which again is its niche, right? It's the paradox of specificity. I think of Ripple and I think of cross-border payments, as much as that phrase gets memed on. I think of Ripple, and I think of them as kind of bridging the gap and increasing the trust and compliance with blockchain. And I'm very happy that they had the victory with the lawsuit, because as much as some people might have been upset, the benefits of that cascade to improve trust for the entire industry, whether that's Cardano, whether that's Bitcoin or anything else. And there's a great post by Ripple. I think that's their pin post, kind of a recap, which I recommend people to dive deep into. It's a quick bullet point on all their acquisitions, what they've achieved so far. And they go into more detail about their strategic acquisitions, RLUSD, of course, 75 regulatory licenses globally, 3 times growth in Ripple Prime business, 6 acquisitions completed in just over 2 years, and over $95 billion in total Ripple payments volume. And that's just, again, the tip of the iceberg. So I'm a numbers guy, and I just see that and I'm just like, good stuff, keep it up. And I think that RLUSD probably will be like top 20, top 30 in less than probably a year at this rate.
Charles also mentioned that he thinks XRP and Midnight could be $10 trillion real world asset cryptos. Do you think that's accomplishable in the next, 5 or 10 years or so?
Yeah, real world assets, often people just think like, oh, like gold brick. But, as Charles has mentioned too, it's in the words of Charles, as I paraphrase, that stablecoins are the number one use case for real world assets, and many more. Charles did say on Sunday that chains like XRP Ledger, Midnight will do very well, as these are the only ledgers where you can have an adult conversation about real world assets, a $10 trillion market, and a conversation about regulated commercial activity. The thing that often people forget about is they just think on-chain, on-chain, on-chain. But you have to have conversations off-chain. You got to shake hands off-chain. You got to sign the executive orders off-chain. And then we talk about on-chain. And so often people forget about the attitudinal stuff and the value of traditional stuff, in the sense that Midnight, technology-wise, is going to allow, via selective disclosure, rational privacy, zero knowledge proofs and whatnot, to allow a lot of that TradFi to exist in a way that they can be compliant, but at the same time, and also satisfy, compliance officers, but also operate on chain. Any business needs to hide certain things, abstract certain things. You don't walk into a McDonald's and they say, hey, yeah, there's $10,000 in this cash register. It's glass. I'm going to tell you exactly. There's certain business practices that have to be abstracted for the benefit of the business and the users. And Ripple also, back to the kind of off-chain attitudinal and license perspective, they are helping to boost the confidence for Wall Street, for a variety of companies around the world, to take a look at blockchain seriously. That, hey, we can operate on here. We can go ahead and move, stocks on chain. We can do this on chain. We can now open the floodgates and not just be 9 to 5. Let's also operate 24/7. Let's do it in a way where we can mitigate a lot of unnecessary fees. And I would just end with this. The Uber CEO did say in the summer of this year that they're taking a look at stablecoin integrations. And the reason for that was for mitigating costs. Cost mitigation. It's not that they're in love with, oh, let's change the world, the blockchain, like in a cringe way. They're going to make more money. And if they can make more money and you can kind of remove middlemen, why not? That was the whole premise and the whole kind of mission statement of on-demand liquidity with Ripple payments. So whether it's compliance, whether it's boosting perceived trust, or whether it is just removing middlemen to benefit both the user and benefit also companies, there's definitely a heap of benefits. And that's why I would say that kind of pushing TradFi, pushing for also privacy, but also like banking stuff, they're all pretty much weaved together, if you will.
So you had just mentioned privacy. Obviously, that's what Midnight does. Zcash privacy has been a big narrative as of late. Do you foresee XRP doing anything in the privacy sector or implementing anything on chain?
Yeah, that's a good question. XRP has a lot of like technology that is often overlooked. I was actually looking a little bit into digital identity, zero knowledge proofs, things of this nature. I don't want to comment on anything that I'm not extremely. There's some stuff that's I'm not super knowledgeable about regarding XRP Ledger, regarding like zero knowledge proofs and digital identity in terms of the available capabilities now and what will be coming. But those are also very at the forefront of XRP. Like I can't send someone to their XRP address a bunch of like junk NFTs. I can't just like airdrop them nonsense. Um, that's something that a lot of like Ethereum wallets would struggle with. That was something that, if people recall back in Tornado Cash, when Tornado Cash was experiencing its issues until everything was dropped, I remember that people's wallets were getting frozen and some people were blackmailing Shaquille O'Neal's wallet by like sending him stuff from Tornado Cash, getting his wallet blocked. But there are, for lack of a better word, I would say firewalls in place. With XRP Ledger, you have, I believe it's called the tag ID. Like there's certain things you need in order to transact with one another for the benefit of the security of the users and the businesses involved, so that certain things are not just taken advantage of or exploited. That's actually something that I believe in Cardano they want to explore. There's a developer who wants to explore a Cardano improvement proposal with kind of like this guard, something that guards the wallets in a way. I won't bore with the technicalities, but just protecting users better, protecting, not being like coerced with some weird transaction or sent some nonsense NFT that they never agreed to or something like that. I think that XRP Ledger like naturally will just go into these fields of zero knowledge proofs in terms of digital identity, selective disclosure, you name it. And they will likely also tap into Midnight as a API, if you will. Midnight very generally put is, think of it as like ChatGPT. You integrate ChatGPT, ChatGPT continues to get better, 3, 4, 5, 5.1. But you don't have to go and invent ChatGPT. You can benefit from it as an API with its integration. And so whether XRPL wants to continue to evolve its own privacy technology or leverage Midnight as an API, so to speak, we can definitely see both, where then XRP users can spend in their own underlying assets, take advantage of apps, kind of hybrid apps, as Charles calls it, and benefit from there. So XRPL, I don't know a whole lot about its existing digital identity and privacy solutions, but I know there are some stuff there as well. But also, Midnight will open the door for them to leverage it as well, because they are one of the recipients of the Glacier drop and also one of the selected chains when it comes to multi-resource consensus and whatnot. So I don't see any reason why XRPL wouldn't pursue kind of privacy, and all that jazz.
XRP and Cardano are also two coins that are not only in the made in USA category, but also the ISO 20022, which I think is really big for compliance and for other reasons as well. Do you think that those two things are big catalysts for those two projects over a lot of other altcoins?
Yeah, ISO gets memed often a lot. People are like, November 22nd is coming. It's going to pump. This is going to happen. And I'm just finding the post here. So I think that sometimes people give too much credit to it, right? They're like, oh, ISO, like 589, we're going to $10,000. Like, we have to be a little bit pragmatic. And, the Moon Boys will be the Moon Boys. Like, I think that they're around and they're very positive and very like cheerful and they got that energy going on. So it's a lot better than just moaning and groaning on the timeline. I do think that it is important. In the words of Swift, Swift says that ISO 20022 is an open global standard for financial information. It provides consistent, rich, and structured data that can be used for every kind of financial business transaction. That's just from their website. And CoinMarketCap did add Cardano to their list of ISO 20022 projects recently, alongside XRP. And that's usually more of a talking piece for, XRP Army. One thing that I included on my X was just kind of a thread where when the Federal Reserve also deployed this ISO 20022 for FedWire, and that's their real-time settlement system for banks, which processes millions of dollars daily. But again, it's more for like compliance, a messaging system. It's not in as I understand it, it's not kind of this like magic wand that we're just going to like start doing like trillions of dollars of volume. Instead, I think it's more about upgrading messaging standards, compliance, and there's sometimes a lot of heat on X about like what it means and it's this or that. And I like to just look at it as that. Like I don't try to give it too much credit than what it actually serves. I don't think that we'll see it as if like XRPL just replaces Swift, or Swift is just like, okay, yes, XRP, we're going to use it. I think that these will all work concurrently. And there are projects that may be eligible or suitable for such standards or meet such standards. But again, we just have to act with caution in terms of like what everything means. And I think it's just best for us to see it as like compliance, messaging standard, and moving forward with kind of the next evolution of global payments, if you will. So I don't see it as kind of black or white. It's kind of truth is somewhere in between regarding this standard.
Now, you're an interesting guy, I would say, because most people are either, diehard XRP fans, and they also hate Bitcoin and a lot of other projects as well. But I feel like you are just kind of accepting of the entire space and understanding, there's not this, what's the word I'm looking for? Tribalism.
Yeah, like one or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, the tribalism in crypto can be insane, but I've never seen any of that from you, it's like holistic, so I appreciate that approach from you. But like, what can you say to this space of like the people that just feed into the nonsense and all the tribalism? What can you say to those individuals out there?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's easy. It happens kind of like automatically, if you will. It's like my project wins and yours is crap. And we see that with sports too, right? Like we see that with like football and whatnot around the world. But if we think about it psychologically, like let's just put the, blockchain aside, is like, you're going to have LeBron James on the Lakers. And yes, he was on this team. And yes, he was on that team. There's still good sportsmanship between them. They're not like, no, it's your team's trash or this or that. There's still good sportsmanship. I mean, a lot of the NBA players that are very valuable are sometimes free agents that decide like, hey, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. We also have to think about just the philosophy. I love philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, this and that, and just thinking outside the box. It's going to bode us well to think more open-minded, to have thinking about the silver lining of situations. I would say that the Cardano incident, the silver lining was that there was a common antagonist. The entities put their egos aside, and now we have a quote unquote, in the words of Charles, newfound unity, which was fantastic. So when it comes to ending like tribalism and whatnot, we have to think about the whole premise of liberty. Like you as an individual, Paul, me as an individual, people should have the right to transact and make decisions, make informed decisions as they see fit, without other people kind of impeding upon that. It kind of comes back to freedom of speech. And I'm sure that a lot of the blockchain fathers, if you will, would love for people to decide on their own accord. What do I like? How would I like to diversify? Putting my eggs in multiple baskets. How bizarre it would be if I was like, Paul, only silver, don't get gold. Gold's a scam. Don't you dare buy gold. Only silver, only platinum. You'd be like, what are you talking about, right? And in the real world, we see collaboration. We see cars where maybe there's tens of manufacturers working together, from the transmission to the engine. And I would say that we need to focus more on the user-centric apps, solving problems. How can we fit into the pocket of the user? Not how can we force them into our way of thinking, riddled with technical jargon, riddled with a 500-page manual to use something. So I think it really comes back to just treating each other as like a human being, seeing beyond, right, the horizon in terms of like, you know what, we can both agree to disagree. Maybe two things can be true. And I was saying as a joke, but it's true. Like, I love my New Balance shoes when I go running, but I also wear my Italian leather loafers when I go outside, right? Some dress shoes. How bizarre it would be. No, Paul, only one pair of shoes. You can't do it at all. It's not the case, right? Different fashion, different style. In our own lives, we see whether it's food, whether it's fashion, or other examples, kind of this desire for selection, for variety. That's why we call it a kid in the candy store, not kid and there's just one candy. So I think when we reflect on that, and even when we look at cars and other businesses and whatnot, we do like selection. And I think it's very cheap and low effort for us to just force feed our narrative on other people. Incentivize them with kindness, build bridges, build value, and people will come. And I think when we saw the Solana co-founder defend Charles and defend the design of Cardano, I think people were surprised. And it just further showcases that it's better for us to be more meek, have more restraint. It will bode well moving forward. So just let people do what they do. Respect their freedom and respect their liberty. Because I have those three. That's my biggest holdings. XRP, ADA, BTC. It's not that complicated.
So what was it about XRP then specifically that made you, when you came back from your vacation, you said, well, I'm now going to make content on XRP as well. There's a lot of other cryptos out there. I'm sure you had an inkling or maybe you wanted to do this for a long time, but what was it specifically that made you had that shift from, BTC and ADA, but also XRP now as well?
I would say that a lot of times people focus hyper on code. But I think it was Grant Cardone or someone else who said, you hire for attitude, you train for aptitude. And just seeing the attitudinal factors of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse and whatnot, very professional, focused on action, focused on delivery. I mean, heck, Brad Garlinghouse only has like 1,500 tweets. He doesn't tweet like all the time, always. So he's shown to be like a man of action. Now, I've never met Brad Garlinghouse yet. Love to shake hands with him and meet him one day. So one was the attitude of Ripple. The other was the network effect. You can't really just wave a wand and have a strong community. That takes time. And XRP Army is one of the biggest communities. We know this is true just in terms of engagement, in terms of looking statistics on X, the amount of times the tickers and whatnot are mentioned. So the community, that's a second one. Third was I liked its simplicity. I like that movement of money is incentivized rather than just kind of corroding and sitting. And so not having that native staking as a proof of consensus protocol meant that from the beginning, it was already carbon neutral. From the beginning, it was already incentivizing movement, which means that users are more kind of inclined to spend their XRP, move it around with automated market makers, and also the native DEX. That's also something that people forget about. You got DEX aggregators, you got this abandoned DEX, but XRP Ledger has a native DEX right on its core. And so when I would use a decentralized exchange, I just whip out my phone. The only wallet on my phone is Zaman Wallet. It's by XRPL Labs. And it's so easy to use. I don't even need to install a desktop wallet. I just scan a QR code on the DEX on my PC, and then boom, it just talks to my phone. All the DEXs are just a graphical user interface pointing to the same native DEX on XRPL, which means what? You don't get this kind of like abandoned DEX that no one is using anymore. You don't get kind of like these missing fees because no one's using XYZ DEX. You don't need an aggregator because everyone's kind of pointing to the same one. And so I liked its design philosophy and variety of other stuff as well. I think that from a brand perspective, I love brand. In fact, when I made Angry Crypto Show, the beginning days were like responding to Ben Armstrong and like reacting to meme coins. And those are the early days. The OGs know. And I would actually judge meme coins like MOG. We called MOG early. Like some of the meme coins we reacted to early and knew they were a blue chip. I would judge them based off of their charisma and storytelling and branding. And XRP is awesome. Name equals ticker. Superb SEO. XRP sounds really slick. And so it's easy for the boomers to understand too, what we gonna need some exit liquidity. Everyone needs a little bit of exit liquidity. The boomers are gonna understand XRP. And look, Dave Portnoy. Why? Because the branding, XRP Army. Those qualitative things, which is not code, the qualitative things in terms of emotion, brand, storytelling, narrative, its niche, I think is second to none when it comes to XRP. And I think that the age of the everything burger blockchains may be problematic. That's why we have that Homer Simpson meme with like, is it a supercar? Is it a van? Is it this? Is it that? And Homer just kind of put together this weird, Frankenstein that doesn't have any niche, right? Is it a coupe or is it a minivan or is it a truck? And I think that XRP stands unique in its narrative as kind of the internet of money. And when we evaluate the attitude of the founders, well, Ripple and the rest, yeah, it's evident to see that XRP is a really nice looking project and easy for retail to understand, which is why we see like Matthew Sigel and many others say like retail comes up to me and they're like ADA XRP. And usually they're kind of mentioned together. And yeah, the branding is very powerful. So I like to not overthink. People keep trying to overthink. They're trying to find the next XRP. Like, no, man, they're trying to find the next Ronaldo. It's Ronaldo. They're trying to find the next Messi. That's Messi. And so as stupid as it sounds, it's sometimes some of the most profound, important things. Good brand, good name, good ticker, dope team. They deliver. And just in 24 hours ago, minted $15 million. And that was some of my gripes also with the Cardano. And I told them publicly. And Charles knows that there's pain points with stablecoins that like, don't just show me or don't just tell me, show me, then the line doesn't lie. So I've liked that overall. They have a fantastic value proposition.
So how big do you think these ETFs are going to be then for XRP specifically? Because they have a lot pending.
The XRP ETFs have been crushing it. I have a post here in terms of, actually, it's from Cointelegraph, or maybe it is from another one. So the XRP ETFs are huge. XRP, according to Coin Bureau, just beat Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana in ETF inflows, over $164 million, with Grayscale and Franklin Templeton already pulling in $67 million and $62 million on their debut. So the institutional interest is there. The retail interest is there. I think we're going to see a lot more. Franklin Templeton is also expanding one of their ETF indexes, which will go live on December 1st. It's already live, but they're expanding it. It's called, the ticker is Easy Peasy. Awesome branding again. Superb branding. And it currently holds Bitcoin and Ethereum, but on December 1st, it will also include ADA, Doge, Chainlink, Solana, XLM, and XRP. And so whether it is like Canary Capital, Bitwise, Franklin Templeton, Grayscale, they have been crushing it when it comes to trade volume, but also the holdings, the inflows. And I think that's just going to keep going up. In the words of Sentiment, they were speaking about recently just all the retail wallets dumping, and smart money, they called it, has been accumulating. So I think we're going to continue to see that, the shaking out of paper hands, and they're just going to come back when we hit all-time highs from Bitcoin down from there. So I think ETFs are important. I don't really subscribe to the idea of ETFs being evil or ETFs are bad. I think in the words of David Schwartz, they realize that it's not like one replaces the other. It's kind of like this beautiful harmony between them. It would be unrealistic to just think like, I pulled up to Starbucks today. I didn't pay in ADA or XRP, like I paid in fiat. We sometimes have to be honest with ourselves and be pragmatic that, when we go our day-to-day lives, we have to just see things realistically. And I think ETFs, ETPs and whatnot act as a simple way to remove all the difficult barriers to entry, whether it's institutional folk, retail, to allow to get some exposure to crypto. And I think that's why I mean, look at the name, easy peasy lemon squeezy. The ticker is easy peasy. It's literally obvious. Easy peasy. You want to get like 10 tickers? Buy this. Now, yes, we have to take a look at like who's the custodian. Is it 100% fully backed by the underlying asset? Are there best practices? What are the management fees, etc.? But it just acts as another investment vehicle for people to get involved. In some cases, get some nice benefits too, staking and whatnot. So I see it as just a plus. And if other edge case users want to enjoy like sovereignty and having your own keys and this and that, right? Then to each their own. So I just say, comes back to that mantra of like respect their decision and both can coexist. So I think ETFs will continue to play an important role. Where I think people slip up is they think like ETF announcement, we need to go to $10. It doesn't really work that way. I think personally, when we've seen ETFs go live, they take some time. They take some time for it to kind of accumulate. You won't see that price action go up immensely immediately. Could take months.
XRP has been suppressed and Ripple for a long time by the SEC. Ripple spent millions of dollars on legal fees. The price of the XRP token has most likely been suppressed for a long time because of all this. Now that most of this is behind us, we still have JP Morgan kind of coming after XRP, trying to get their banking license. It's almost over with. But now that it's almost basically in the past, do you think that XRP now has a launch pad to actually have good price action? Ripple actually has the time to do what they want to do?
I think so. I think that, no one really knows. If someone says they 100% know, they probably don't know. No one has a crystal ball. When it comes to price action, I like to just be a contrarian, ready for getting wrecked and potentially going to a bear. Shout out to Crypto Jeb. He was mentioning, he was doing some Bitcoin TA and he was talking about all the huge buy orders, fill orders at the 60, 70K range for Bitcoin, but then also kind of talking about institutions that were dumping and the potential for Bitcoin to just be explosive to the upside. Both sides. It's good to kind of consider both situations of kind of upside or downside volatility. I would say that acquiring all these licenses and acquisitions and whatnot does set some strong rails for positive price volatility. But it's one of those things where I think that the cycles are the cycles. Yes, we hear about super cycle and it's no longer a 4-year cycle, but I think that people can't be bearish forever. Eventually society will hit kind of more of a risk on mindset. Now, whether interest rate cuts contribute to that or not, we'll have to wait and see. There is more money in terms of monetary supply than there's ever been. There's a huge gargantuan amount of stablecoin issuance and money that is just kind of sidelined. And when we go back to what I was mentioning about US dollar dominance and expanding the dollar, there's a lot of capital, more than there's ever been. And so I think there's more reasons to be optimistic for upside volatility, whether that's Bitcoin, whether that's XRP, ADA, and others, than to be bearish. But it is good to hedge your bets and to diversify and to de-risk, or in my own words, the goblin hands, as Alex Becker would talk about. Maybe you're shorting a little bit, maybe you're rebuying back in a position. It's good to flex that sell muscle if that is your desired method, because sometimes people buy, and then they forget, wait a second, like there's such thing as taking profits. I didn't know that. So I would say that taking a look at the market sentiment can change quickly. And even today, Polymarket predicts an 85% chance now that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates by 25 basis points on December 10th. We got the wave of ETFs. We got huge monetary policy. We still have this pro-crypto administration. So there's a lot. And also, lest we forget, clarity, which, in the words of Charles, like a lot of that momentum in crypto was taken away a lot from the government shutdowns and this and that. So I think we will return back to some more positive sentiment, because I recall greed fear index hitting like worse than FTX levels. Like how much worse is it gonna get? You know, like, and I think people often overestimate bearishness. They think like, oh, Bitcoin's going to $100. Is that possible? Sure. Is that probable? Probably not. So I think if we look more on being pragmatic, being more on probability, not just possibility, there's a lot on the itinerary of like bullish things ahead.
So staying on that, then being pragmatic, we've heard pretty insane XRP price predictions. I think it was Jake Claver, I think his name was. He was on the forget his name, the Dropping Bombs podcast, Bradley, and he said XRP is going to, I think, $1,000. He said,
Oh,
is
man.
that possible?
You know, it's funny because like back in the day in the bear market, I was recording TikToks and I would do the most stupid videos where I was like, oh, let's go to $500 trillion. That's comedy. It was intentionally comedy. And I wasn't serious at all. I was just joking, but I love the energy of the XRP army. You know, I was trying to explain 589 to a guy it was Miami NFT week in 2022. And he didn't even know what XRP was. He was like, huh? Like, what's 589? What does that mean? And Brad Garlinghouse is following 589 people. So, you know, this kind of like this bullish kind of like mania, if you will, is also shared among like the Ripple guys as well, which is good. I like that they're zesty. I like they're professional, but they also have some cheeky humor. Now, in terms of XRP's price prediction, I do think that XRP is basically like a beach ball under the water. And I think that the more we get stablecoin issuance, ETFs raising the floor of XRP, I think it's just going to increase the pressure more and more. I think the slingshot is being pulled back further and further. And people just think, oh, whatever. And then boom. Because there were a lot of people who were cheesed that XRP ran from like 40 cents to $3 back in November with the inauguration of the president shortly after. So $1,000, I mean, anything's possible. But I think that it's not unrealistic to expect XRP to still run to say like $4, $5, make some new all-time highs. Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think XRP made much, if not an all-time high, compared to its very first pump. I think back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. So I try to be pragmatic, you know, but I also like it when these guys say these crazy predictions. Do they actually mean it? Who knows? But I do think that XRP could run to like $5, $6, $7, $10, maybe more. Because when you look at NVIDIA, yes, this company, NVIDIA, produces, you know, hardware and whatnot. Yes, it's not on the same category, but we have Microsoft in the trillions of dollars, NVIDIA in the trillions of dollars, Apple in the trillions of dollars. And so we look at Ripple, we look at XRP. One could argue that, yes, it's kind of undervalued compared to the massive bubble speculation that many other industries have already done. You have NVIDIA far exceeding our entire industry. So I think that the retail is just asleep. My mom's coworkers a few days ago were like, get out of Bitcoin. It's going down. And it was when it was like really low. And I'm like, yep, I think the bottom is it. I think the bottom is it. I was telling my brother and a friend of mine that social sentiment is a very important probe. We got to wait until we hear the dentist and the doctor talking about XRP, because for all intents and purposes, I don't think we've reached that frothy top. Even psychologically, ask yourselves as a community, who is really flexing on the timeline all their unrealized gains? I didn't really see much. So even though we've had these micro pumps in different projects, I don't think we've seen like this colossal altcoin season that many have been expecting. So with that being said, I think that we'll see a lot of upside volatility to XRP. And that's where people make a critical mistake. They think like, I'm going to go invest in this rando coin that just came out a week ago and is just going to like make tons of gains. More often than not, the decisions are very simple, but people complicate it. And we saw that, right? With Solana when it was at like $9, XRP like 20, 30, 40 cents for like multiple years. Same thing with Cardano. There's a tweet still live by Luke Belmar, love that guy, where he's like, oh, ADA's done. and it was at 33 cents. As soon as he said that, 1 week later, it ran to $1.10. Not too bad. So I think that social sentiment is also something people should pay attention to in either direction, when we're too bearish, but also when we become super, the froth of the cup, if you will.
Now, you had talked about NVIDIA and Microsoft, a couple other companies. AI is huge. It's going to continue to be huge for the rest of our lives. I don't think people understand that. But can XRP benefit from AI in any way, maybe through acquisitions or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess we'll see. We'll see kind of what Ripple are up to in regards to that. I think that AI isn't. I know there's some people who are just like, oh, it's a bubble, it's done. Well, the thing about bubbles is that bubbles can get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger than that. Now, bursting the bubble, sure, there can be industries where the bubble bursts, but I do think that AI is really engraved in what we're doing. And whether you see what Google is doing, whether we see how NVIDIA is kind of going all in, I don't think the AI bubble is going to burst anytime soon. This could be going on and on. In terms of Ripple's involvement, I don't really have much of a thought regarding how they would get involved, but I don't see how they wouldn't one way or another, just given their interest with TradFi, stablecoins, payments, all that jazz. AI is going to play one role, either directly or indirectly. So only time will tell. But yeah, AI as an industry, I don't think is going away anytime soon. In fact, it just continues to get, I would say, more involved in our daily lives, whether it's as simple as something like Gemini being integrated right into Google search for no extra clicks, or anything else, or even the situations where, it can be, taken advantage of. Either case, AI, I think, will continue to grow, and we'll just see more involvement with it, which is fine. I think that, again, coming to that silver lining, if AI can help us focus more on being human and excelling in what we do best, rather than maybe staring at a spreadsheet for 5,000 hours, then so be it. If it can help us enjoy our content creation and get faster at the finish line, then even the better. So it's really just contextual at the end of the day. But I definitely see Ripple and whatnot being more and more involved naturally, so to speak.
What's something about XRP that maybe we haven't touched on yet today that is something that excites you, that you think is just super positive, good catalyst for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we covered a lot in terms of like ETFs, stablecoin issuance, stuff with Midnight and whatnot, and attitudes of Ripple and branding, XRP Army. I think that one thing that would be great to finish on a note of is, yes, you're going to have all that ETF goodness around the corner. And in the words of Eric Balchunas, ETF analyst for Bloomberg, he says, quote, there's likely over 100 ETFs in the next 6 months. So just to give you an idea in terms of the capacity, I would say I'm really excited to see for XRP more yield products. So there was a few yield products that I brought up on my system here to just mention, which are, because XRP doesn't have native staking, it's proof of consensus, and that could change. We are seeing the Ripple community talk about like smart contracts, discussions there. People have their fears or concerns, pros and cons. A lot of people like the simplicity of XRP Ledger, including myself. But I am very excited for the yield products that have come to fruition for XRP. So one of them, of course, is when Axelar Network made the announcement this month. And that's with MXRP, I believe. So that's on BNB chain. And they call it the first liquid staking token for XRP through their MXRP. And so that, again, gives you yield options. Another one, of course, is Flare. A lot of people were waiting for that for a long time, which is up and running, FXRP, which is dope, which what that does is essentially just allows you to trade, lend, provide liquidity, all without giving up custody of your XRP. That's the words of Flare. And also we did see in the summer, Coinbase wrapped XRP, which went live in the summer. And people also kind of use that on platforms like Aerodrome. with Base. So it's nice to see other networks start to wrap XRP, hold custody of XRP, provide options, because people like options. They want some yield. They might want to provide some liquidity. We saw the excitement around automated market makers for XRP users. And again, because people like to move their money because there's no native staking, people will naturally kind of jump into these different options. And Charles Hoskinson did say that XRP Ledger is coming to their wallet, Lace. And so Lace Wallet, a popular Cardano wallet by the input output team, will bring XRP. And because they have that simple toggle for Bitcoin and they're working on Bitcoin DeFi, Bitcoin yield, XRP was the natural addition, which was slated for a end of the year release, but probably it's going to be a little bit later. So I'm really excited to see like yield options come to fruition. And we see exchanges too. Bitroo. So Bitroo recently was making a post about they called it kind of their highest XRP yield. So whether it's centralized exchanges or whether it is DeFi solutions, I'm excited to see more yield products, because with the likes of Bitcoin DeFi, people are really liking this. I think that we are in the age of privacy and yield products. And I think that privacy yield products kind of also, as part of that, naturally is like ETFs, investment vehicles, TradFi, all that come together.
Yep. So where can we find you on social medias, brother?
Yeah, man, just X on YouTube. So Angry Crypto Show over on X, Angry Crypto Show over on YouTube. And stay safe as we approach more and more positive upside volatility. Naturally, there's going to be more scammers, more imposters. So double, triple check no matter what. And XRP, ADA, I call them brothers. I keep pushing that narrative. It's Goku and Vegeta, whatever you want to say. It's just important for us to look at the upside and celebrate the differences. They complement one another. So thank you so much, man. I appreciate you having me on the show. And I think there's really bright days for XRP.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure having you on. I totally agree. Guys, make sure to go follow Angry Crypto on YouTube, on X. Make sure to like this video when it comes out, and we'll see you soon.